Ladies and gentlemen, I am standing on hallowed ground here in Saginaw, Michigan. This is White Pine Stadium, and you would probably never know it by the small little stands and the random field, but this is where some of the best soccer players in the world have played before. Carlos Valderrama, Colombian player who played at the 1994 World Cup here in America and has played in Copa America. He played right here. This is where the Flint City Bucks, or at the time they were known as the Mid-Michigan Bucks, were founded back in 1995. And they played here from 1995 until 2003. They would play against teams like the Tampa Bay Mutiny and the Miami Fusion and US Open Cups. They would travel to New England and pull one of the greatest upsets in US Open Cup history, beating New England 1-0 at Foxborough. And they did it all while playing here at White Pine Middle School, right there off in the distance. These were the stands that their fans would come and cheer them on every weekend and every midweek. And I bet that's where the announcers would sit. And back when they would play against the MLS teams, they said that they would get like 4,000 to 5,000 people here. You can only imagine, you know, 4,000 or 5,000 people packed into these tiny little stands right here. Had to have been a pretty raucous affair. So some of their accomplishments that they had while playing here: they became the first PDL team, or USL League 2 team, to beat an MLS team in US Open Cup. So they were a 4th division team at that point. And they beat the New England Revolution at Foxborough Stadium in a 90th minute winner that stunned the soccer world. They would actually begin play in 1996 in the USISL Premier League. That was the 4th tier at the time also. In 1997, they would win their first ever title. They won their first division title by beating the Grand Rapids Explosion, the Kalamazoo Kingdom, and the Des Moines Menace on the way to the national semifinals before they would end up losing to the Central Coast Roadrunners 2-0. And that year, in 1997, they would also make their US Open Cup debut, beating the Wilmington Hammerheads before losing to the Rochester Raging Rhinos, who would actually go on to win the US Open Cup 2 years later, and they were the last second division side to win the US Open Cup. And then in 1999, they would win their second division title, but unfortunately they would lose in the first round of the playoffs to the Sioux City Breeze. Here's a good shot of the whole field right here. As you guys can see, it's just, you know, there's just houses off in the background. You can literally see people's backyards. Just a couple tiny little stands. And this is the view that the announcers would have looked out at in 1999 when the Tampa Bay Mutiny made their arrival here with Carlos Valderrama, Steve Ralston, you know, guys who won World Cups. Carlos Valderrama actually won 3 bronze medals for Colombia in Copa America. You can imagine what they thought of when they arrived here at this tiny little middle school in a city called Saginaw, a place that most of them have probably never even heard of if you think about it. So predating that US Open Cup appearance here, they actually beat the Austin Lone Stars and the Minnesota Thunder. So when they played Tampa Bay Mutiny, it was in the 3rd round here. There's actually a great forum online that counts down the top 10 Mid-Michigan Bucks games in history here, and it talks about some of the great memories. And I just wanted to read you guys a little snippet from that game against the Tampa Bay Mutiny. This is the game that really started it all, in my opinion. So many soccer fans in Michigan were clueless as to the level of soccer in the area until 4,800 people witnessed some team named the Bucks nearly knock off the MLS Tampa Bay Mutiny, led by international star Carlos Valderrama. My memories of this game are somewhat vague, but I remember Stephen Armstrong shutting down Valderrama and the huge crowd with many Colombians banging drums and cheering on Valderrama. The crowd was like being at an international game, and it was a great time. You can really see how old the stadium is by looking at the little like clubhouses here, the little maintenance garages. You can see like the fence like falling apart, wood kind of starting to rot out a little bit. The stands are pretty new though, but they definitely kept the old garages though. White Pine Stadium, you got 2 white pine trees right in between the scoreboard right there. It's pretty nice. The year 2000 would arguably produce their best team ever, winning their 3rd division title and finishing 27 points clear of 2nd place Dayton Gems. They would host their first ever national title game here, but they would unfortunately lose to the Chicago Sockers. And that year would also culminate in their best ever US Open Cup run. So, in the first round, they would beat amateur side Jerry D's 3-0, which is a great name. But then in the second round is where they would pull off arguably one of the greatest upsets in American soccer history. They would go to Foxborough Stadium, home of the New England Revolution, and they would pull off a 1-0 win. Many of the Revolution regulars didn't play the majority of the game, and it was a man by the name of Chad Shoemaker who scored the game winner. And also, their goalie by the name of Pog came up huge and stopped an early PK. And they would go on to upset the New England Revolution, which would then earn them the right to host the Miami Fusion right here at White Pine Stadium. So that's pretty amazing. In their first 4 years, they were able to host 2 MLS teams here at some random middle school in Saginaw, Michigan, and go to the New England Revolution's, 60,000 seat football stadium and pull off one of the greatest upsets in soccer history here in America. So in that forum that I was telling you guys about, they did a top 10 game, or the top 10 games in Michigan Bucks history, and the Miami Fusion game was voted #1. And that game ended up finishing 3-3. And I want to read to you guys the quote from that forum. This is probably the greatest game, one of the greatest games that I have ever seen in person or on TV. 4,000 plus people were on the edge of their seats for 120 minutes. The Bucks came back from behind on 2 separate occasions to tie the game up before Bonaventure Maratui scored the winning goal with just minutes left that was called back with a handball. Many people say that it didn't actually happen and that the Michigan Bucks were robbed. The teams even had to go to a 6th round of PKs before the Bucks goalkeeper Eric Pog, the man who made the penalty kick save at the Revolution, would miss his shot by sailing it over the bar, and it would move the Miami Fusion on to the next round. So you could just imagine right here, a goalkeeper sailing the ball over the net, and everyone in the crowd putting their hands over their heads. So that year in 2000, their head coach, Joe Malachino, was actually named the PDL Coach of the Year, and well-deserved too. So 2001, they would actually miss the playoffs for the very first time, and they would advance out of the first round of the US Open Cup, but unfortunately they would play the New England Revolution, and New England would get their revenge 7-1. 2002 would be the first time that they didn't win a trophy, so they actually didn't win any trophies in back-to-back years for the first time. But in 2003, they would rebound and win a division title, but fell to the Chicago Fire's reserve team in the conference finals. In the US Open Cup that year, they would actually beat the Long Island Rough Riders before losing to the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars in the second round. And that would actually complete their time here in Saginaw, and they would move down south to a town called Berkeley, but that's a story for another day. It's crazy to think about where the US Open Cup takes you sometimes. It really does take you all over America to places that you would never imagine the beautiful game is played.